This is obviously the third Tuesday of the month meeting, not meeting. WA3FAE and N3yac wanted to do a presentation. So they are here, Forrest and Eileen. So if you have any questions or anything, I'm sure I'll open up the floor for you to talk. And we are recording this, so for later, if anybody.
So watch your language.
Yeah. So cool. Oh, don't forget. Anybody has any other nominations for president, vice president, treasurer, secretary? The next meeting will be the voting meeting.
Let's put one on each row. Yeah. I got some notes here that I've got these electronically. So if anybody wants a copy, you can send me an email at WA3FAE@gmail, and I'll send you a copy. And the reason is because some of these things you might find useful. I've been operating a field day since let me think about it. Now I'm trying to think of the first field day I went to. Probably 1967, 1968. I was operating with a club down in Anne Arundel County called the Maryland Mobileers, and we were on a farm down in Davidsonville off Route 301 going down toward Annapolis. We were operating in a barn, and the guy had a Kenwood. He had a Kenwood TS 520, and I forgot what we had for an antenna, but I know the mosquitoes were active. They got a lot of bites. So I kind of got bitten by the field day bug, and over the years, the club at another time operated at the Anne Arundel Community College down in Arnold on the way down to Annapolis down Ritchie Highway. And we had 6 transmitters in a field next to the college when the college wasn't as developed as it is now. And we were first in the nation in the 6 Alpha class. Now, the funny part about it is, one of the guys there that was a big DXer in the DC area, name was Don Search, W3AZD, and he used to run the QSL bureau for the ARRL before he passed away a few years ago. So I went over and looked at his particular setup, and he's the first one I ever saw to use an automated CQ. This guy had an old 3-inch reel-to-reel tape recorder, and it recorded CQ on it, was having it play through his microphone. So that's the first automated CQ I ever saw, was off this guy's little 3-inch tape recorder, which of course now with voice recorders and stuff is old news. So my daughter put out some sheets there. I did 5 of these because you had 5 transmitters. To try to keep these together when you look at them, pin them back together, hand to the next guy. But what I wrote up was, and something I sent to Chris was, kind of an after-action report on field day. And you'll have to pardon my military language, but I had 32 years in the Army, so it's hard to get rid of that stuff. But basically speaking, when I was there at field day, you guys had the camaraderie part down pat. As far as eating and drinking and stuff like that, nobody could beat you. I hadn't been to any field day where you could have eaten as well as what you guys had there. So it's good for the club because everybody gets together for a common cause. Now, while you're there, you just might want to operate the radio. Well, or you might not. But the point is when I was watching my daughter over there on one of the stations yelling CQ or something for about an hour and getting nowhere, I'm thinking, well, you know, that's a good example of field day, what isn't fun. You don't like to come there to operate and find out that, you know, you thought your station at home was bad. Now they gave you one that's even worse. So when you go to field day, that's the time when you experiment with new antennas. You check out new radios that people have that you didn't buy or you couldn't afford. And there were 2 new ones there which drove me nuts because you guys didn't bring any manuals for them. And then the response to me would be, well, they don't give you with them now, right now. You're supposed to go out and download them yourself, which is probably the case. So I was looking, I think she was on an IC 712 or 718 or something.
Yep.
What was it? A Linko. Okay, that was a Linko.
DXSR8.
Yeah, that reminds me of the small ICOM too. And then they had the IC 7300. And the problem was I was over working on the station next to where the gentleman that's blind in the back was operating. And I had a hard time trying to figure out how to turn the filters on. I got it after a couple minutes, but they weren't labeled, obviously. So if you're going to have people using stations that have never seen them before, for heaven's sakes, bring the manual along so they can see how the radio operates. That was driving me crazy trying to get it going. Now, once you get going, though, then what you need to do is you need to stay out of each other's hair. which is kind of tough to do sometimes. So I want to show you something I came up with at the house. This is my idea on how you do that. Take a piece of cardboard and put it in front of each station. I've put 3 pieces of smooth tape across here, and I've made a sign for every mode and every band that you probably operate. So if this is sitting outside your station and you've got 80 CW and 40 right there, no one has to worry about what band you're on. They know what it is. If I want to operate on 40 CW, I ask you if you're using it. You say, no, I take this off and I go over and I put it on my sign. Because when I was over there on the IC 7300, I didn't know what band it was supposed to be operating, and I didn't know if I was going to be clashing with someone else that was out there. Because now all of a sudden they had a paper log in there, and someone else had a N3FJP log going, so who's going to put the two together? So if you put one of these in front of each station, and they can only operate the bands they got on the front. And I made squares for the sideband, I made triangles for the people that are doing digital. They'd probably do it in 2 groups, maybe 80/40 and 20/15 and 10. So this is what is known in the computer world as a semaphore. It's like a train semaphore. If you don't have this, you don't get on that band. If you want to do it, you look around because all these signs are facing out from your station. You find out who's got the one you want. Hey, you're using 20 CW? Can I have it? Fine, then you take that with you. Oh, and along with that, you put a tag on both ends of your coax, telling people where it goes when you first install them. Make a nice little tag on one end that says what the antenna is used for, what band it covers. So then if you not only want to steal the mode from them, you can steal the antenna because you know which one it was. Questions on this? I think this would really help you a lot if you did something simple like that. I'm going to leave that with you guys because, hey, you only need one of these because you're only going to have one person on that band at a time.
Something that you can do that's similar to what we used to do with model airplanes was clothespins. Same stuff.
Okay.
And then you just pull your, we would use clothespins because we could clip on the antennas.
Yep. Yep.
You could do similar, so you have the clothespins up, you pick up,
Yep.
put it on your radio. And
Doesn't have to be high tech. It's just got to work.
right.
So this way you stay out of each other's hair. I highlighted mine so I could remind myself. Now, part of what we had a problem on, I'm going to show you a way around that in a minute, is intermodulation. You know, I remember my daughter was trying to work on 20 sideband, and 40 meters was getting in there. You could hear it desensing the receiver coming through. I'm going to show you a way around that in a minute. That's why I brought the spectrum analyzer. I wanted to show you a neat trick. A very, very cheap trick, too. That's the best part about it. The coaxes. I brought one piece here because we're going to check that out also. But all your coax runs should be tested ahead of time, meaning that if you have a meter or you have one of the, WA family, maybe the AA55 or something, these are the Ukrainian meters. They work really nicely. Take one of them and check out your coax and see what the loss of it is. Now, what does that matter? All right. One thing you might forget about, okay, so you got the coax and you lose 5 watts on the way to the antenna. If it attenuates that direction, it attenuates this direction. So it attenuates the receiver as much as it does the transmitter. If you're losing power going that way, you're losing signal coming back into the radio. So it's important you have good coax. You guys used a lot of RG8X. That stuff is pretty lossy. Not bad in 80 and 40, but when you get up into the higher frequencies, get up to 10, you know, you may put 100 watts in on one end, you may only get 50 out on the other end, or maybe even 30 or 40. But you ought to know ahead of time. So one of the things I've got in that packet there is I have a list of all my coaxes that I have at the house. I have a list by length. I have this sorted a couple different ways. I've got it by length. I've got what kind of connectors on each end. Because I have some coaxes that have a type N connector on one end and they have a regular PL259 on the other. So if I'm looking for something out in my shed where I got a bunch of them hanging up, I know what I've got before I go looking for it. This is very handy too for yourself to keep a coax inventory. The field day checklist is something I've been using for years. This is refined over 40 years of field days. I just changed it a little bit. On the left side, I made a box where you can just X to say, yep, I brought that along. If it's something that you have more than one of, use the right column and say I brought 3 of them. So the left column says you have it, the right one says how many you have. and you don't have to fill that in if it's only one. That way, if you're bringing cups, soda, things like that, coolers. The comments in there are just comments for me. You can make your own comments. I say I have these files that these were created from, so I can send them to anybody who wants it by email, and you can print your own and you can take it and modify it. I put these in the lowest form of Excel, Excel 2003, so you don't have to own that moneymaker called, Office 360, where they figured out why sell you software when they can make you rent it every year. Okay, this is done with the old style Excel. So Excel 2003, 2010 will work fine. Any questions so far? Yeah, because Microsoft likes to make money. They're very good at it.
Question,
Sir?
not so much a question. About the manuals, I find nifty guides from Nifty Accessories are just wonderful.
Yeah, the ones that you can peel open?
Right.
Yeah.
Because you just need a quick sheet, And the other thing, before we went to computers, for logging and also for coordinating stations, we used plastic milk bottles without milk, and with a Sharpie would mark in black would be various bands, and let's say side bands, and in red would be CW, and another Sharpie different color digital, and we filled it with water.
$6 paid for this, or at least Baltimore County. So he worked for Baltimore County, and he had a guy in the shop that helped him out. So he took a hand weight, drilled it out, took a piece of ground rod, put a fitting on one end, a T-handle on the top, and then he took a bunch of ground rod sections for me, and he fine threaded them. So I can thread my ground rods in here. Now the advantage to that is, in this direction, puts the ground rod in. This way it takes it out. So it saves beating up the end of the ground rod with a hammer. So he made me a really neat tool. And you guys got a lot of good mechanical people up here, so they can make you something similar. This one of your antennas had raised radials. This is how I did it. You buy these at Home Depot. They're aluminum inside with a plastic coating. They're for garden stakes and stuff. You take a short piece of regular thin ground rod and you tap a hole for them. You don't try to push these into the ground. You tap a master hole for them. But you tap a 45-degree hole, you're the antenna. You tap it in like this. You shove this in the ground. When you take that raised radial and come up on the side of the vertical and you tie it to it, you bring it over and you take this tarp clip and you grab the wire and you snap it to it. And then this goes up like this and holds your guy wire up in the road. So you don't have a guy going down to the ground worrying about driving a stake. This is your stake. And it bends some over time. I've bent it back a few times. Get a good 45 on it, it'll generally come up about like that. Cheap. They work really well. I just keep these tie wrapped to the top so I know which ones I used last year. Raised radials work very well. 4 of them. That's all you need. 4 raised radials is equivalent to about 30 ground radials. Trust me, I've done it. Work like a champ. Make your verticals pound out there.
Question?
Sir?
Are the radials perpendicular to the vertical, or?
Yes, yeah. So what you do, hold on. I have ground. You take all your radials, let's assume this is the ground side over here, and this is the hot side. So you take your radials, you tie a string on your vertical up here, somewhere about here, and what you do is you have the radials grounded, they come up, they grow through the string, and they go out to that rod, which is bent out here like this. And you have them on every side, on your 4 sides, and they have the pole like that. Very easy, very quick to put in. Just take a piece of string, tie it around there, put a clove hitch on it, anchor it off, and go out and make a little loop on the end where the wires can come up. This angle's not critical. It could be 30 degrees, could be 45. Bring them up about 4 feet to be effective, and have them go out to this stake. Easy to do, easy to store, not something that takes up a lot of room, but it definitely improves performance of the verticals. Now, your guy wires. Ace Hardware, known as a clothesline tightener. They work like a champ. They take, I think, anywhere from 1/4 to 5/16 rope. They got 3 ball bearings in here. When you pull back like this, it makes the ball bearings open up. You pull the rope through. It's got a bail on it here. The bail on one side goes to the ground rod. You put like a 3 or 4 foot piece of rope on. You pull the wire through it. This actually goes around this way. You put the rope through it, pull it through here, and these grab it. When you're ready to release it, you just pull on the yoke on the top of this thing, lets the guy wire slack, and you take it down. Here's what they look like military style. This is a set of military, this is a military guy wire that I got when I got some military surplus antennas. The military made them out of steel. So this is not an original idea. These are made out of steel. They're not made out of aluminum. And this one's been around probably older than some of the people in the room. So this works good. This is the kind of rope they use. Everything was olive drab, of course, to make it less obvious. So I use these on my verticals all the time. Very fast to tighten them up. Before you push your vertical up, you set these a certain length. So when you put your vertical up, you can let it hang in 2 of them. Put the 3rd guy wire on and then slowly tighten them all up and bring your vertical up to straight up and down. Works nice. So I'm going to leave this and these with your president, and I'm going to leave you guys a coax T too, and I'll show you why in a minute. I talked to somebody while I was at field day about N-fed antennas. This outfit, L&R Precision, makes N-fed antenna balance. This is one for 80 meters. So all I do is pull this up, coax faces down. There's a stainless bolt on the back. The antenna goes on there. These are low power, by the way, about 150, maybe 200 watts max, which is perfect for field day. So the advantage of this is, as I was telling somebody at field day, is you guys had to wind them up and you had a dipole up. So the traditional problem with dipoles is you got a connector in the center and you got all that nice heavy coax dragging down the antenna, so it ends up looking more like this. So with this, all you need is a good support. This balun ends up being up here. Your heavy coax comes straight down, and the antenna is the only thing that's got any weight to it is the antenna wire, which goes over to wherever you anchor it on the other end. And these can be done, they can be done in a sloper as well. They can come down like this. These work very well. They load up very nicely. On the lower bands, they're reasonably wide. I mean, on the upper bands. I'm trying to know what the bandwidth was in 80. Probably maybe 80 to 100 kilohertz. You can make the wire longer to tune to the code end of the band. You can make it shorter. And all you got to do on that is take the wire and double it back on itself to make it short without cutting it. Then expand it back out when you want to use it on the phone portion. Questions on that? And you can make these. You can make them for higher power too if you'd like.
You usually make them per band or multi?
These are per band. I have a multi at the house. I made it in a square electrical box, and I made it with a what was a Type 43 or a 30. I think a 30 ferrite in there. I put a couple of them together so it would handle some power. And you can set the wire length on an N-fed antenna 2 ways. You can make it a little bit screwball length, and what that allows it to do is have a reasonable impedance over 80 through 10, where you can set it exactly to the right one for the band you want, and then it's only really useful in that band, and it has a very high SWR for the other bands. And there's lots of good articles out there, and some good ones on YouTube too, showing you how to do it. Let's see, any other questions so far? Sir?
When you're talking about folding back the wire, that works with bare wire, but with insulated, it don't work the way you expect.
What you can do on that is you can get, I'm trying to remember what they're called, wire nuts. Wire nuts are a split bolt. They're a brass split bolt that has a nut on it that has a piece on the nut which pushes the wire down the slot. And you could go back and you could skin the wire back where you wanted to take it back to the other length and put that on there, and that would short it at that location. Yeah, sometimes these compromises don't work as well as you would like. Now, the reason I've got the spectrum analyzer is I want to show you this last little trick. When my daughter was using the 20 meters, she was getting the 40 meter interference. So this particular piece of coax just happens to be a quarter of a wave on 40 meters because I used it as a phasing line when I had two verticals I was phasing. What's the impedance at the end of a quarter wave of coax at the frequency of interest? It's a dead short. What's it at the half wave? Half wave, it disappears effectively, except for the loss of the coax. So what that means is, if you want to be able to see what the antenna really looks like, make the coax a half wave at the frequency of the antenna. Then the coax essentially disappears, and you're actually looking at 1.2 to 1 at the antenna, instead of seeing 1.8 to 1 at the other end of the coax, because the coax is giving you the impedance that you see at the end of the coax, not the impedance that's seen at the other end. So if you have coaxes for your antennas that are cut half wave to the antenna you're feeding, you can see the antenna's impedance. It works out real nicely. Now, let's talk about the stubs though. So if we had a quarter wave stub teed off of your antenna, what would happen would be it's going to suck that frequency out. So I'm going to give you an example up here. I've got the function generator zeroed at the top of the screen, and so essentially what it has done is it's taken the appearance of all this cabling and it's taken it into account and says, okay, I'm compensating for that electrically. So right now it's invisible, just like me telling you a half wave of coax. Now the reason I picked that particular one, because I've got this set for 90 megahertz. So I took a piece of RG58 and I cut it in half, and I left the ends open, because what did I say happens if you have a quarter wave that's open at the end? It's a short. All right, so I've got the generator going from, let's see, what do I have it? Center frequency of 90 megahertz. Now when I put that in there, watch what happens on the display. It's notching. Now it's doing it slowly because what I've said to do is average it over 50 different times. So it's going to give you a notch on here. And it's telling you that the notch is already up to 47 decibels, which is a really deep notch. So if you took this piece of coax over here and put it on a T to the 20 meter station, I'm going to suck the 40 meter interference out right here. But this is going to look invisible to the 20 meter station, and it's not going to affect their operation at all. You with me? Now, what do the big boys do? One of the biggest stations on the East Coast is down the road about 15 miles from me, W3LPL. He's got 7 towers that are like 175 feet or something. He's big guns. He's got a multi station in his basement with K3s and K4s at every station. They use commercial filters for each band, which cost anywhere from $300 to $400 each, because they run power. So as long as you're not running 500 watts, that coax is going to be okay. You could even use RGX, RG58, whatever you want. Now, if the question comes out, how do you cut the stud? Let's see what that settled in at. That settled in at 56. Now, I'm going to look at something else on here. Let's look at what they call the 3 dB half points. 3 dBs represents a loss of how much power? Half power. All right, so if we put the 3 dB setting on here, it says that this notch is 950 kilohertz wide. Now, at this frequency, that's very easy to accomplish because it's very high. If I had this down on 40 meters, that would probably only be about maybe 50, maybe 80 kilohertz wide. So it may not cover everybody across the entire code portion, which is interfering with your station. So I'm going to show you how to widen the notch. So these two are cut where one of them is about a quarter inch different than the other one. So I'm going to put a second one in here and see what happens. And we'll turn that marker off, and we'll let it build. It's building its 50 counts. It's going to take a second here to get that back to the 1. And we're going to see what the notch looks like now. So that's 2 coaxes. Now the notch is 63 decibels deep. The 3D half point is now 1.5 megs wide. So it almost doubled the width of it, because I made these two just close enough, instead of being on top of each other, they're like this. So the notch is now essentially going past both of those frequencies. Now let's make it bigger than that. This one I didn't know about till I watched the guy's video. He said what you want to do is you want to put a quarter wave between these two. So I have a quarter wave between the two of them. Watch what happens to it next. Let me turn that function off. Right now, keep in mind, it was about 67 deep. Let's put this in between them. Okay, it's going 80 more. And I want you to see what the width of this is when we get done doing this. When this thing settles down, look at what the 3 dB width is. It's like 6 or 7 megs. It's huge. You could suck out the entire band underneath of you. So the 3 dB half points right now are 4.95 megacycles wide. Really wide. So let's talk about not even getting fancy. Just put a T in your coax, go onto your station, and put a stub out there for the guy that's bothering you. If you're on 20, put a 40-meter stub on there. Now, if you wanted, let's say you don't have a meter, or you don't have one of those meters. Take the calculation, go in and work it out with the velocity factor. What's the velocity factor in coax mean? Why do we have to use that? Because waves travel in space really fast. They don't do too well through solids. So the velocity factor says, what percentage of the speed of light does it really travel? So for ordinary coax, it says I only go 66% as fast as I would if I was out in the air. So if it was this long in the air, it's this long in coax. So you need to take that formula, which is found in the handbook and a bunch of other places on the web, calculate out what your stub length should be. Let's say they said it was, this one I think is 22.5 feet, I think. This was 22.5 feet. So you could say, take this and cut it for 24, and just go out there with a set of cutters and just start lopping off an inch until you get down to where it's done it. You can do it in a semi-scientific manner. If someone's got a meter or one of the Zoom meters, one of these ones made by the Ukrainians, the AA meters, WA3FAE is the lower one. This is the 230. This one has Bluetooth on it also. Take one of these. This has a setting on here that says check stub length. So if I put this on there right now, it'll go out there and tell you what the quarter wave length is and what the half wave length is. So put a meter on if you really want to get closer. But if you put it on there, then you've got a real nice cheap thing. And one of the things, if you look at the video out there, one guy used it to get rid of a broadcast station that was bothering him. He had an FM station on 91.9 or something. So he calculated out what stub length he needed to get rid of 91.9. Put it on a T, bingo, sucked out the broadcast station. But you just have to know what's coming in and what's interfering with you. All right, so the 3 dB point ended up at 5.9 megacycles wide. So it really made a difference putting that extra quarter wave in there. Sir?
I played with that, and it's right on. That's an expensive instrument, about $1,000, but a nano VNA, the small one, is about $50. And I just set mine on to be a fancy sweeping antenna analyzer, and that's all I use it for. Nano VNA, and then there's several of them, about $100, which is slightly lower.
I got one. It's about 200. It's a JNC radio one. Yeah. They work nice.
Yeah.
Yep. Still playing with that. Trouble with that is the connectors are real small. They're SMAs.
Yeah, there's an SAA version with end connectors.
Yeah, the one that costs more
Yeah.
for this company. The one that costs more for this company. The one I got was $200. The one that has the type N connectors on it's like $450. And then the one that's above that is $600. Yeah. These are only 1,000 now. They were a lot more than that when I got it. Yeah. And then if you get it without the tracking generator, you can't do all the fancy tricks. So this frequency generator goes step in step with this guy over here. That's how come you can do these sweeps and everything. And it's nice. Yeah, I have to admit, I have not used this thing enough to make it worth it, you know. Just like anybody else. You like to buy a new toy, lose interest, wife makes you clean the garage.
Actually, that's sits on the shelf, and a couple times a year, you're so glad you have it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you lend it out to other members of the.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Hell no. No, no. You know, I put my transmitter into that thing and it stopped working for some reason. No, 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 no. My father was a craftsman. My father was a glass mechanic. He was a glazier. And he said, you never lend your tools to anybody. That was the way he made his trade. The way he made his trade is on his tools. Nope. So as a kid, we couldn't touch his tools. We had this shitty box of tools under the kitchen sink where the screwdriver tips were broken, the pliers didn't work, and that's the only thing we could touch. The only time you could use them is if you were working under his auspices. And auspices means you're within slapping range, okay? If you were that close, you could use his tools. Other than that, don't touch them. No. So this is something I saw probably would benefit you guys the most, and it's the cheapest thing to do. Grab a piece of coax, find one that doesn't have a connector on one end. You only need it on one end. Cut yourself a quarter wave stub. Works like a champ. You just saw it, proof in the pudding. And I did it at 90 megahertz, like I said, because all these parts are real small. And I had a piece of coax around. I didn't mind cutting in half. And this, by the way, the better meters like this one will also do a type of calibration which is called open short load. OSL is what they abbreviate it. And what that means is you put, let's say I wanted to test an antenna on the end of this piece of coax. So the first thing I would do is I would hook the coax up, and then on the other end, I would go through the calibration and says, okay, put me an open on there. And I have a connector that's an open. I screw that on the other end and says, okay, I've seen that. Now, put me a short on the other end. I put that connector on and says, okay, I've seen that. Now give me the load, and it's a 50 ohm load. I put that on. It's okay, we're done. And then what happens is every time I use it in here, it has a little C down the corner that tells me that I'm calibrated. But I'm only calibrated for that piece of coax to the very end of that coax, which is all I wanted right now. If I want it for a different coax, I've got to do the whole thing again. Now the VNAs he talked about, the one I got will store 11 settings. It'll store 11 different pieces of cable. So you could do it with different cables.
I think that's the issue with the nano VNAs is the calibration of them, especially the cheaper ones that you have to calibrate pretty much every time you use it.
This one that I've got stores it, and when I turn it on, it's there. And it's going to has 11 storages on it now, and the software, it's funny. I go out to the site, there's a software update. I'm clicking on the button. Nothing's happening. I look at it real close. Software update next Saturday. So they gave you advance warning and a dummy button, so you could sit there and click it all week if you wanted, but it's not going to work until next Saturday. So next Saturday I'll be able to update it. It's going to make it a little bit better. It gave you a list of the features they're going to change and stuff. So the tools are nice. You know, like I was telling somebody on the way in, remember the old saying, the difference between men and boys is the price of their toys? And you all know that, you're hams, okay? And I can remember what my first transmitter looked like. I bought it from a kid in high school who had gotten a DX60, and he sold me his DX40. So he was just one notch above me. And that's the one where there's a little hole in the back, and you had 3 little crystal spots in there. You had to put the crystals in, you had to go back there and turn a selector switch which one you wanted to use. And back in those days, hams got to know each other from all the way across the room. You would CQ here, and the other guy was like 10 kilohertz that away, or 5 kilohertz that away. So when you called CQ, you hurried up and tuned up and down the band to see where he answered you, because he was stuck on the crystal too. And he only had one on 10, you had one on 30. So you had to call CQ on 30 and go listening all over until you found out where he was. Oh, he had the one on 10. And the next guy might be up here on 50. So back then, the VFOs were a luxury. They were the people that had the Collins radios, the ultra $1,000 radios. So as a result, you guys are spoiled today, Everybody's supposed to be sitting right on top of you. In fact, if they're not on top of you, you refuse to talk to them, Just pretend you don't hear him. He's too far off. He'll call again when he finds out what he's doing wrong. Yeah. Been there, done that.
Less than part per million, errors.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and that's another nice thing about these equipment. I've got a GPS receiver at home, so this has a jack on the back where I can hook this into the GPS and get this better than 1 part per million. So when I read a frequency on there, it is the frequency, no question about it. Yep. It's a neat device. I don't use it to the extent that I should, or to the extent that it could be used. It's true, but I'm not running a repair shop either. So Let's see if I forgot anything. I think that's all of it. Big thing is, field day's only fun if you talk to people, okay? Oh, another comment. Antennas. What's better, vertical or horizontal? And let me see all the hands for vertical. Let's talk field day. Let's talk field day. Who says vertical's better antenna field day? Ah, the lawyer. The lawyer in the cloud. Lawyers never give you the right answer. They always say depends, okay? So there's my lawyer. All right, so.
I mean, proper location.
What's that?
Proper antenna for proper location is.
That's a lot of it. Some space requirements, you know. Guys in town don't have a 100-foot lot. Got to put a vertical up or something sticks up in the air than horizontal. Verticals are okay.
Or angles of takeoff.
Pardon?
It's angles of takeoff. If you're in a valley, you need higher.
What? Okay, yeah. But then you're almost getting into skywaves and NBIS antennas that are going straight up.
Vertical dipoles, they're pretty good.
If you got room for that, and if you got room to bring the coax, which is supposed to leave the antenna a quarter wave before it bends, how are you going to pull it out that far? It can be done. Okay, I run a pair of phased verticals at my house. These are high gain, I think. I've got them a quarter wave apart. Quarter wave? Yeah, quarter wave apart. I've got 68 radials. I have a friend who was crazy enough to get on his hands and knees with me in February and push 68 wires into the ground. So what we did was, sir.
I hate to do this to you, Forrest, but there is some newer hands. Could you explain how many feet a quarter wave apart is?
Oh, it depends upon the frequency.
Okay.
So for
There's the lawyer now.
40 meters, no, but I have an answer. Lawyers don't, unless you pay for it. Quarter wave is roughly 16 feet for 40 meters. Now, when I sighted them with the idea that I might add a third one later, which I'm glad I didn't because that was a lot of work putting them in. So I put a piece of steel pipe in. I capped it so it didn't fill with water. And if this is true north, I put them like this. So I put all my radials out, and I'll tell you how I spread them out. And where they met the radials from this guy, I cut them short, and I put a 2-inch strip of copper, dug a trench for it, and I soldered every radial to that where they met, going across. We ain't talking about a one-day operation here. So now, to put these out, I bought a radial plate that goes at the bottom of the antenna, which has all the bolts and stuff on it. And the way I fanned these out was, I got a bag of 100 plastic knives. And I wrapped them around the end of the knife, and I went out there and stuck them in the ground, pulled them tight, and looked at them until I spaced them all out. You got me? This one's too close, move that one over. So every one of these was on plastic knives. Then I borrowed a guy's sidewalk edger, a gas sidewalk edger, and I sidewalk edged a slot for that wire. Took a piece of aluminum, about this big, took a piece of wood, put it on the edge of it, bolted it on it, and I took that piece of aluminum like you would use to divide up meat, and I pushed the wire down the ground with this piece of aluminum, 2 inches in the ground. All 68 of them. Me and a friend of mine. He doesn't let me forget it either. So we put them all in, got them all bonded together. To put all these together, I ran number 6 out to them, all the way back to my house, and I used CAD welds on them. You know what CAD welds are? You can rent them from RF Connection down in Gaithersburg. He'll rent you the tool for 35 bucks. He'll sell you the CAD welds. They're a little, let's see, I'll show you. Here, you're gonna be my earth ground. Hold that there for me a sec.
They're carbon mold.
They got a ceramic mold that goes on here. The wire goes in here, and you have an igniter. And when you ignite it, this thing gets up to who knows how many thousand degrees, and it fuses the copper wire to the ground rod. No worry about corrosion. It ain't never going to come apart. So I ran that past them. I ran it past, I didn't even tell you about the phase box. I had to make a box to phase these things. So I was looking at the phase box in, like, let's say October, and when I was ready to buy it in April, we don't make them anymore. So I scratched my head on that one. But what they did have is some very nice color photos. So this goes in a box in the ground, one of those electrical boxes that's about this big and about that deep, with a square lid on it, with a rubber seal. So what I did was I built their matching device from their picture. I wound the coils, did all the capacitors and stuff, and they had it wired inside, not with wires, but with copper strip. Copper strip between all the pieces. So to simulate the copper strip when I built it, I cut cardboard, like shirt cardboard. I cut cardboard strips, and I put them in there and bent them and taped them to all the locations where they're going to go. And one at a time I removed them and cut in a piece of copper strip that matched it and put it in there and soldered it in place. And it worked. And it worked. And put some high voltage doorknob style capacitors in there until I got a match. So the reason I wanted to build it was when I finished building this, my antenna with a switch in the shack has 3 patterns. My default pattern is a cardioid. It's stronger than this though. Let's see if this one's stronger. Did I try a marker? There we go. Yeah. So my cardioid pattern here, that's my default. So this is to the southwest. My other one is to the northeast. Throw the switch the other way. And the third position is a propeller, like that. So I have 3 patterns without even moving the antennas. And the advantage you have on here, even though the guys have beams, 40-meter beams and stuff, it takes them a while to rotate. Flip the switch, I'm there. So the nice thing is when I'm listening to a station, I made a little box for it which has a switch that's on in one direction, temporary the other. So if I want to hear if the guy's up in the northeast, I just hold it down for a second. Is he louder? Okay, then I flip the switch up. So I can test which direction he's in before I throw the switch. So that's my moneymaker antennas, my 40-phase verticals. Otherwise, my station's very modest. I have a vertical for 20 meters up through 6 meters. Sir?
So we have a lot of newer hams that are getting into HF. Can you recommend a HF antenna for a beginner that maybe has a small amount of land? Maybe they have room for a tower, or could you recommend anything for a beginner?
How limited is their money?
Okay. Well,
No, the reason I ask is
I understand that.
an antenna I considered, which is really nice, is if you've ever looked at the High Gains 18HT tower. They have an 80-meter tower, which also has work band stubs for it, 12 meters, 17, stuff like that. But it's going to take a 3-foot cubic block of concrete. It's going to take, the antenna's probably up close to $2,000 now and stuff. It doesn't rotate, the old common saying about verticals, they radiate poorly in all directions. Okay, so with a real good radial system and stuff like that, it's going to be a gangbuster, but it's going to go all over the places. Whereas my verticals, I can use them in a directional fashion. Sir?
2 things. First of all, what did you say a quarter wave on 40 meters was?
16 feet, I think it is.
Try that for 20 meters.
20. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. 33 feet. 33.
All right.
33
what
feet.
you've shown us up here, you will find in some of the broadcast industry in AM.
Mm-hmm.
That's common. In fact, there's a station here locally, I'm pretty sure it does that. And what would you say about, based on Chris's question about what would it be, an expensive or affordable antenna for somebody that's starting out? What would you think about something like a balance line, 450 ohm line to like an inverted V, something like that, stretch it out?
One of the guys that's one of the biggest contesters in the DC area, he lives down in Wheaton, I think it is. He's N3QE. He's the current treasurer of the Potomac Valley Radio Club. And he uses has he got a dipole? He's got his doublet or whatever's up in his trees about 90 feet, and he feeds it with open wire like that. Or it can be commercial open wire, it can be the old-fashioned open wire made with dog bone insulators and stuff like that. And he consistently puts in superb scores. So you could do that, but the problem's going to be if you're using open wire, it's affected by everything that's near it. Trees, wet trees, dogs, the ground, whatever it is. And most guys in the old days would bring it to the shack. You see the pictures, they had the big standoff insulators on the outside, almost like the power company uses, with the bolt in the center and a nice big hole through the house, and then the same thing on the inside. And then they would bring it off to their balanced tuner, and they would have to have a tuner. So you don't want to be using a tuner all the time, even an automatic tuner, even the ones that have a memory in them, if you can get around it. Because after all, what is a tuner really doing? It's matching what the tuner sees right here in front of it. Okay, I got the rig on one side, looks like 50 ohms, no problem. I got the antenna feed line over here, looks like who knows what. Now, if it's open wiring stuff, which is extremely low loss, like I think it's like 0.05% or something, it's much better than coax. Not a big deal, and it does a pretty good job. But you have to understand with coax, like I was telling you a minute ago with the 1/2 and the 1/4 waves and stuff like that, you're not seeing what the antenna really is. You're feeling smug and happy because I got 1.2 on my coax. Yeah, and your antenna is like 2.5 to 1 because the coax is fooling you. It's hiding what the real impedance is on the other end, you know. It needs to be balanced. And that's one thing comment I forgot to make was when you guys do field day, the idea is to have all 3 pieces be balanced. Have a reasonable radio with a reasonable antenna and a good piece of feed line between them. If any one of those 3 things fails, you're going to be dissatisfied. You have a great radio and good coax, and you're over there trying to load a clothes hanger, and you wonder why you're not getting anybody, okay? Gee, one of those pieces isn't right. So that's the important thing in field days, to figure out what a balanced station is. Modest radio, fine. RG8X is fine. Have an antenna on the other end that you know plays. Preferably one you used at home that you translocated, or something that you know somebody else has used and told you that it works great and they told you how to set it up. You guys had a lot of verticals, so you were blasting into each other's ears. When we used to work on repeaters, the rule of thumb for antenna separation is 1 feet of vertical separation is equivalent to 10 feet of horizontal separation. You put an antenna 10 feet higher than another one, it's the same as moving it 100 feet away. So you got to understand vertical separation means a lot when it comes to verticals. Now, the reason we're talking about the antennas too was it's nice to have 2. When I worked the Maryland QSO party last weekend, I was using my 80 meter end-fed antenna and I was loading it up on 40 and 20 and everything else because my tuner can do it, because it was quieter. Band noise was horrible, static crashes and stuff, which are always worse on a vertical. So you want to have one of each possible if you can. You want to have something horizontal, even if maybe you only use it as a receive antenna. You know, the guy on the other end maybe doesn't have thunderstorms. He doesn't have any noise. If he can hear you, fine. So transmit on the one that sounds crappy on listening and listen on the one that's quieter. So when you flip your antennas, give yourself a horizontal receive antenna and a vertical transmit maybe. You know, hams are notorious for, you know, whatever it works. The buddy of mine that do field day with, his first apartment down near Ellicott City, we put a 15 meter dipole in the attic of his apartment. And it worked fine. He worked, I don't know, 35, 40 countries, something like that. So, you know, radio waves are not particular. They follow the rules of the game. And if you can make it work, it's fun to do.
Harold, you got a question?
Sir.
On your vertical here, where's the radiator?
Where the black lines are coming out the bottom.
Oh, not radiator. Where's the?
Oh, stick straight up in the air.
vertical at? I don't know what you're talking about.
It's at the center.
Yeah,
the black dots.
you're in a drone. You're looking down at it overhead. It's that dot.
The black dots.
But it's not hooked. Does it hook to the radio or come close?
There's your verticals. This
Okay.
is on the hot side. These are all fastened to that
Yeah.
ground wire plate that's at the bottom.
So
And
you
then-
have 2 verticals.
Yeah, I have 2.
All right.
Yeah,
see,
because I was
kinda
setting
close.
up for a possible third, because then I could have had a couple more patterns. Of course, don't ask me how I would have designed. The matching box would have been another problem because I didn't have one to take a picture
I
of.
thought it was that little thing up on top there.
No, that's the north. That's my north arrow. It's a little weak. It's a little weak.
Now, so you have verticals, Eddie, and you said that they do not make them anymore, or they do?
Oh, these they make, yeah.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
gonna say,
Matchbox.
Oh, they don't make the matching box. No. Oh, you know, and then they turn around a year or so later, all of a sudden they come out with it again now. They got one that matches 4 verticals.
I was gonna say, what's comparable? What could you say is comparable to what you have?
Mm.
Titan Gap,
Well, you can still get those antennas and put a good 40 meter vertical up. I'm trying to remember what they cost. They weren't cheap. The whole setup cost me, I think, in actual dollars at that time, and this has probably been 15 years ago, it cost me, I think, just under $2,000. So the verticals were probably $400 or $500 each, I imagine.
So you would go vertical over
On a small lot, I would go vertical, and I would use raised radials on the band of choice. So if you had a 20 through 10 vertical in your backyard and you really wanted to bang out on 20, because 20 stays open most of the time, 15 and 10 go to sleep at night. 20 goes to sleep at night too in the non-11 year peak years. And that's the reason I chose 40, because 40 is open all throughout the sunspot cycle. A little better sometimes than others, but you know, it's an all the time band. 80 is not. You know, a lot of people avoid 80. It's got a lot more noise. It's got a lot more idiots on there. So, you know, and they don't make filters for that yet. So, and 80, some of these bands too are only populated during contests. You know, 80, I went to 80 CW one day. I was like, wow, where all these guys come from? Had to be 50 to 100 stations because there was a contest on. The rest of the time, there's a couple nets that meet down there, maybe 6, 8 stations over 200 kilocycles. So.
We meet every Wednesday at 8 o'clock on 3.813 for our Western Maryland HF.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of nets up topside too. 160, that's another snobby band, you know.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. You know, hams can be real jerks at times, you know. When we went on the mountain up there and operated 160, I don't know why we bothered to put that 260-foot dipole up. I think we worked 6 stations. Everybody else out there was rag chewing, acted like we weren't even there. Called CQ till you're blue in the face.
So for this antenna system you got, are you getting a lot more gain in one direction as opposed
Oh,
to
yeah.
just one single?
Oh yeah, and it's not just a gain; it's a rejection.
Okay, so
Knocks them down-
you're more at
Knocks them
the
down.
loss on the sides. of
Knocks
the
you down
lobe.
30 dB off the back. Now the lobes are not that narrow. It's not like a beam. Every element you add narrows the beam, puts a
Right.
few little small blurbs in there. These may be if you went and did this, that might be 120 degrees. So it's not super narrow. But this might be 20, 30 dBs rejection. So if I'm getting Europeans pounding the hell out of me and I'm trying to work Texas, just throw it in that direction, Europeans get knocked down. Yeah. And like I said, because I've got a band scope on my K3, my Elecraft, and I can watch the signals and just watch the peaks go up and down when I flip the switch to see where they are. If I want to work to New England, which is up this way, I just watch the blips. When I turn the switch, the guys that stayed stronger got stronger. It's a New England station. Sure enough, got Massachusetts, Connecticut, things like that. We're up in Newfoundland, so it's a nice, cheap man's beam, you know, because you don't have to worry about having a tower up in the air. You don't have to worry about building permits. You don't have to worry about it falling over. I had a tower. I had a 40-foot tower with a 15-foot mast, and I worked 2-meter contests. I had a 19-element beam on 2. I had a 11-element beam, I think it was. No, 15-element beam on 432. So I took a couple VHF contests with it. A lot of work.
So are these full quarter wave?
Full quarter wave.
verticals?
No coils in the bottom, just the bolt where you attach to them. And the neat thing is the plate they got for them has a pattern cut in it where you loosen the nuts, you can lay the antenna over. Bad wind coming, just put a sheetrock bucket out there, lay the antenna down on top of the bucket until the wind goes by, go up, goes up like this, drops right back down the notch.
You don't have any guys on them?
Nope, guy free. Didn't want any guy wires. I run those two. I run a 12, I have the 20 through 6 meter antenna that a buddy of mine gave me because he bought a 40 meter version of the vertical. And then I have what's on the other pole? Then I have my end-fed antenna, my end-fed for 80 meters up. And in the wintertime, where the end-fed 80 dead ends at one of my guy poles, I have a bullet connector on there for my 14 gauge wire, and I add a 160 piece, and I go down the bottom of my yard, put another pole up, and so I run a laid down L in the wintertime to get on 160, which still loads on 80. In the summertime, I take it down, take that pole down, take that section of wire, roll it back up, just take the bullet connector loose and tie it to the mast. Sir?
You're in-fed on 80, your feed point, what do you use there?
The box that I built with the balance I built.
Okay, what is the balance on that, about 9 to 1 or something?
I'd have to look.
Thereabouts?
I have to look at the article I did on that.
Okay, all right.
I
And
got
you're
some-
feeding that with,
Just standard coax.
Good.
Standard coax.
all right.
And I got a counterpoise, drop it down off it. They said it helps. You don't have to have it, but they said a counterpoise helps.
All right.
You take a counterpoise down, you can lay it on the
You
ground.
run a tuner on that, the shack, or?
I'm trying to think if I have to.
Okay.
I do run it. I think it's resonant in the code portion, so if I want to go up to, in fact, there's a spot down the code portion that doesn't like too much. It may get up to 3 to 1 or something. It's a real small notch, like let's say, oh, I don't know, 35, 60, 35, 40, it's fine.
135 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood,
What's that?
about 135 feet, somewhere out there, what are you?
No, it's half,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
half a dipole.
Half of that, okay.
Yeah, so it's about 60, 65 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I got my property is, I got a 3 1/4 acres. I got 365 feet on the side. So I can put a big antenna up, but you know, the older you get, the less attractive that is. Your friends are never around anymore when you want them to do things, or they can't climb, they can't lift, they can't bend over, you know. So, no, really, a lot of hams run into that, you know. There are commercial companies out there that make good money. I've been reading in the emails all the time about guys that have these commercial hams that go out there and put people's antennas up in towers and stuff like that. My tower, you won't believe this, my self-supporting 40-foot tower, I put it up by myself with my wife. She helped me. I tore it down with my wife 25 years later. I had a 16-foot 2x4 I strapped on there as a gin pole, had a pulley on there. I pulled the sections up, she held it for me. I went over, put the two together, did the same thing going backwards. Took the bolts out, she pulled it up, lowered it down to the ground. We took the whole thing down by ourselves. Yep. A few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, but
About your verticals, what is this, wire or
oh, it's aluminum. It's
Pipe,
tapered aluminum, all screwed together.
tapered?
Yep. It's about
So you bought these? or-
yeah, they're brand new. They were brand new in the box. Yep.
So how tall are they?
33 feet. So there's a compound you get. I got a ground copper solution compound you put between them to keep them from oxidizing and stuff. So all the joints on there have this copper compound on them between them so that they don't have any problem.
By the way, on that CAD weld,
Yeah.
that's gunpowder and powdered bronze.
It's cool stuff.
That melts it.
If you want to see something equivalent, go out and watch the videos where the guys put the railroad rails together. Same kind of stuff. I watched them do it one day and I said, wow, that's a big CAD weld. But it works pretty neat. In fact, the funny part on that was they were doing it at 8:30 in the morning. They said, we have to do it now because the rails grow and shrink so much with the heat. That was the only time of day they could do it, so the rails were the right distance apart. I said, wow, didn't have to do that. I'm taking up a lot of time. I'm keeping you guys past your bedtime. Any questions? Big thing is make the stations balanced, okay? Do the testing ahead of time. Look at my sheet. I've probably thought of everything on here except the cat or the dog. They're not on there on my field day sheet, and you'll see the different things we come up with, some really screwball stuff.
Very impressive.
But that's 40-some years of field day, you know? Because we used to get the stuff, throw it in my van. I'd have poles on top of the van. We drove to Eastern Shore trying to find field day and found the guys were working at a rest stop above Easton. We pulled in and fell in on top of them, put our antennas up, and operated with the Easton Club. And we went over a couple more summers and operated with them. So, yeah, people are all over the place doing this crazy stuff. Hams are crazy. Do some weird things. They do. But it's fun.
Anybody have any questions for you? No?
Thanks for letting me come see you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting me field day. It was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys are invited anytime, you know that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
We used to have an individual picnic and field day, and we combined them. That's why the food is the food.
You had that part down pat. I saw no improvements there. fact, I think the only thing he did was somebody had to go get ice or something like that one time. They had to make a run for ice.
No, they went out for fruit.
For fruit, okay.
And there was
Well,
no
we do need
fruit.
fibers,
They had
so
to bring
let's
in
not-
whole fruit.
Now, if there was improvement, the only thing I could say could be improved would be perhaps that one whole building could be improved a little bit. That was a little bit rudimentary.
The one.
The
what?
John.
Oh,
One
oh.
shooter.
Yeah, yeah.
The bar wasn't big enough.
Well, it used to be a hole with boards, but.
Well, that's
a
true.
board with holes,
Yep.
but.
Now, some of the clubs, will rent potties for the day or something like that, but no, it was good. All right, so you got 5 sets of sheets. So if you got 5 stations next year, give them to whoever the station captains are and let them set it up. And then don't forget, the more preparation you do on it, the less surprises you got. The one surprise that struck me, the reason I wanted to put this together, was the guy that brought the rig and didn't bring the power cables. We had like 2 identical Lycoms sitting there, like a 740 or a 940 and 950, and one of them didn't have cables. So the one that got used was the one that had cables, power cables. So one of them was sitting there as a gigantic paperweight. So, and don't get me wrong, I've done that before. And if you're 100 miles away from home, that's really embarrassing. So you want to make sure that you have a good checklist and you look at it and you use it. Okay, I'll clean my toys up. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You gotta talk about this.
And by the way, the code machine is just for those people that don't understand. Oh, let me cure a myth right now. I've used code since the very beginning, and the one lie that hams have done for years, and it's a dirty lie, is that they're better people because they do code. They're not. Code is a physical thing, just like riding a bike. Some people can't ride a bike well. It's a physical skill. It has nothing to do with being a better ham. Got it? So don't let them give you that bullshit. I do it. I like it. I don't mind it, but I do not claim it makes me a better ham. It just makes me do something you can't do, the same way you can ride a bike or someone can pole vault or something like that. It's a physical skill.
Of course, they have a lot of this will do this will do that, beginner stuff. What do you think the best way is to learn for us?
You know how I learned? I bought a 99-cent code oscillator on a little circuit board from Radio Shack. I took an old fingernail file. I took a bare wire, hooked a speaker up to it, and I tapped the code out on that fingernail file. Didn't even have a straight key. Had a little reel-to-reel tape recorder. Was it reel-to-reel? Reel-to-reel or cassette? Might have been cassette. And I did the first 4 letters. I wrote them on a piece of paper and I tapped them into that machine. I played them back until I got it right. I scrambled it one more time. I added 4 more, put all 8 together, and I did it 4 letters at a time until I did the whole alphabet. Took a while, probably a week or more, but by the time I got done, I could probably copy maybe 8 to 10 words a minute, something like that. But there are walls along the way. I had a wall somewhere around 13 and 15, something like that, and another one around 18 or something like that. I can converse comfortably now about 35, 40. But most of the time, I rate the contest about what I set the speed at. So the last contest the contest I worked at, the guys were screaming about close to 40 words a minute. And when you got Slovenian contacts that are like S55IS, that's all dots, and you're trying to read that at 40 words a minute, you end up listening to them 10 times before you finally get the call right. So, sir.
You copying ahead at that speed?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He can do
So you hear-
multiple.
So you hear the words.
When you get that speed, you're hearing words, yeah.
That's exactly right.
And that's the problem if you don't hear words real well. And my memory, my short-term memory is not what it used to be, so I'm having more trouble now too. But the point is that the guys in the military, the buddy of mine that copy code in the military, they learn with a typewriter, and he's much better than me because they're translating it to the keyboard immediately. And I've tried copying on a computer that way and stuff, but I do better just trying to catch the sentences and everything. But contests are so easy because they're repetitive. The only part you have to really understand is the call sign. But by the time you get that and you type it in, the computer's doing the sending. You've got your messages, your response messages canned. The guy's out there in a call history file. It's already got his name filled in. It's already got his location filled in, unless he changed it, which some of them do. You type that in. No. But it's nice. It's a nice skill to have, but it's a physical skill. So don't be fooled by it. But that's the kind of machine you want to do it. This machine right here is one that I got at the last Hamfest at Berryville for 40 bucks. I got one out at Dayton for like 30 bucks or something. They cost about 180, 190 new. They will store 32,000 characters. you can load an entire article into there. And then that way, if it came out of QSD, when you're done, you can check your copy by going out there. If you hook the serial port up to your computer, it'll show it on the screen. So I said, if you're running a class, you use this for the class, you keep the screen turned off, and when you're done, you turn it back on, say, all right, there it is, now check your copy. So, nope, it's pretty cool. I use it in the car for a field day. I stick it in the cigarette lighter and let it play the conversations back. These are the conversations. This is where it talks to itself. This is set by default for 24 words a minute max. You can set that much lower. You can set that like at 15, and it will start lower than that and work its way up to 15. But it's doing real context, so you can actually get an idea what a conversation sounds like in code. It's calling CQ right now. It'll answer itself, but it answers with a different pitch and a different speed. He's a little slower. And they swap name, RST, what the weather is, what his state is. They come up with some excuse, dinner's on the table, they end up and they go away. So when it gets done between these two, you can break in, and if the guy calls CQ, you can have a key hooked up, and you can go back to it at whatever speed you want. If you want to go back nice and slow like that, you can go back slow and he'll have a conversation with you. So it's pretty cool. Now if you really get bored, this has another section called Dr. DX. And now what you do is you go in and you tell it what your longitude and latitude are. So if you're on some exotic island and you come up with a call sign for yourself and you tell them that you're on 20 meters, this thing will give you skip that you would hear at that island on 20 meters. And you'll hear people calling you, and it'll keep score. At the end, you can ask it what your score was. So it'll even do a fake contest with you. So if you really get bored and you're trapped in some cabin and you only have a battery, you can play this thing and you can have a contest. And that's something this is like early 90s. This is like 1992.
What's that called?
This is called a Morse-matic. This is an MM3. So it has a dial speed indicator on here, or you can send it to it and tell it, I want it to only go a certain speed. So he's talking about his antenna, he's talking about his radio, how many watts he's running. But the nice thing is when he uses two pitches like that, you can tell who's who. So then when he gets done, he signs off. The other guy's name was Les. He said, I'm saying goodbye to Les. Yep, pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to pack him up, guys.